Here alongside John Ramdeen and Robin Black, Bellator president Scott Coker recently did an interview with Newsweek, and the topic of CM Punk came up, where Coker stated that if he was contractually available, they would definitely have interest. I don't think any shock, especially if you have followed Scott Coker's history or anyone that is in the business of gaining traction and attention. However, Phil Brooks is under contract to the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Coker said this about, if you have a name in mixed martial arts, you don't have to have a name in mixed martial arts. If you have a name in whatever your chosen endeavor is, and you decide that you want to try mixed martial arts, Scott Coker will probably have a conversation with you. There's no guarantee that you'll be signed to Bellator. I was going to say Strikeforce, but Bellator. But he's a guy that understands what entertainment is, and he understands how to fill seats. And of course, that's what he had Kimbo as one of his fighters. He's had James Thompson, he's had Ken Shamrock. So he understands that CM Punk would not only fill the venue, but people would tune in on TV. But he wouldn't put, throw this guy to the wolves. He would put CM Punk, Phil Brooks in there with somebody that makes sense. He wouldn't put him in there with a 24-year-old that's going to destroy this guy. Scott Coker would find some guy closer to his age with experience in Japanese pro wrestling or whatever, and that's the type of fight he would put together.
Soulja Boy versus Chris Brown. How about that?
I don't even know what that is.
Those are two rappers, I believe. We only talk about fighting, who I think Floyd Mayweather is training to fight, one of them to fight each other.
There you go.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
This is what's going on out there, folks. We didn't invent it. But I think for CM Punk, I think this would be a great fit for him. But the UFC is in the business of not having their opponents take things of value. Yeah. So that would be an issue. But I think Bellator would be a great fit for him. He could fight some guy who's close to 40, who's 2-2. Yeah. And, this is a guy who left a lucrative and successful business that he did to go in and try to immerse himself in fighting. And after a couple of years, you're not going to be very good at it, but good enough to fight at a very low level. And I think Bellator will give him a low-level fight.
Do you see the UFC actually letting this guy go, though?
Maybe not right now, but if you give him another opportunity in the UFC and he performs, who is the UFC? Is the UFC going to take that same approach? Are they going to say, you know what? Let's find this guy somebody that's close to his skill level and match him up with him in the UFC, or say, okay, we just have to find the guy with the least impressive record on our roster, and that's who we're matching Phil Brooks up with? Or are they trying to tailor an opponent for CM Punk, or are they going to give him somebody from their own stable?
That's it. A 40-year-old guy who trained hard for a year and a half cannot beat the lowest level guy in the UFC. We said this in the beginning. We saw this to be true. We know this to be true. So we have to find somebody very low level to fight this guy who is very low level, which means whoever this guy is now a UFC fighter, and that's the problem. So, but I think they'll find a way. They know there's some value in this guy and his audience and his Twitter followers, and they can find someone somehow on another TV show or one of their web things or looking for a fight. There's a way to be able to have him fight, and I think that's what'll happen. But Bellator would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. It just seems that you've invested now. They signed this guy in 2014. It's been 2 years. They put a reality show together on this guy. His pay-per-view number was an above-average one. Why are you going to just cut this guy and send him over to Bellator, where we know this guy can command an audience? That's the one metric that he's being judged by. I don't think anyone has any aspirations of where this guy is going to be fighting at that level. Do you find an ultimate fighter for him? Do you put him on free television? I mean, to some, it's like, I don't know if it's really a myth, this compromising the integrity, because I feel that everyone realizes this for what it is. I think they see different variations of what the UFC is and where fighter 500 is as compared to fighter number 1.
Right, but if they match Phil with the second worst fighter in the UFC right now, do you think there's going to be any difference in the outcome?
No.
Do you think it's going to be any different than what we saw when he fought in Cleveland? I would think no. So then what are you going to do? You're just going to keep give him the third worst fighter, hoping that eventually maybe he's going to win a fight? No. Because this is the way things are going to unfold.
He won't win any fight. You need a terrible fighter for him to fight. And that's just, when you're not good, you're not a high-level professional, you can't compete with high-level professionals in any sport or anything. But I disagree, Pollock, that it is, that you said it's a myth of compromising the integrity. I think it is absolutely a compromisation of integrity. But I think that ship's already sailed. So I disagree with you that it isn't.
How has the perception of the UFC changed
What I'm
since
saying
they used
is,
Punk?
it is, but it is a complete compromising of the integrity of high-level fighting. I disagree. It is that. The problem is, and I think what you might be saying is that's already been done. We've already compromised the level, the high caliber of super high level pros. So since we've already done it, what's the big deal if you do it again with CM Punk? And I think that's accurate.
I just think you look at it that there's wide variations. To me, watching that Punk fight, I think people that tuned in for that walked away with a much higher respect for the level it takes to compete at this level.
I'm sure.
To be honest, I feel that you can't do in 2 years of intense training. You can't hang at this.
But those people are also confused because they see Mickey Gall as Mickey Gall is the level that UFC fighters are at. Mickey Gall is, when you rate UFC fighters, let's just use Luke Rockhold as an example. When you're rating their skills, how does Mickey Gall compare to Luke Rockhold?
That's the thing. Even Mickey Gall himself is confused. Never mind the audience that likes him, and he's a very charming, likable, interesting guy with probably a bright future. He thinks he can beat Dan Hardy. And when you say that as a professional analyst, people will say to you, "Oh man, he'd kill Hardy on the feet, on the ground. He's a brown belt." He's just a kid who's beaten CM Punk and Sage Northcutt. Dan Hardy went 25 minutes with George St. Pierre and has one of the great minds in all of fighting. You know what I mean? Even that. So we've already done this. This has already happened. We're discussing it as if, this might compromise. This already happened. We've already done it. The NFL doesn't let somebody come from high school and go on there, and then when they get killed, go, see, that's great. We saw that the NFL's tough. We know the NFL's tough, but we've done it, and we have confused the audience. We've confused them potentially forever. Even Mickey Gall himself is confused into thinking he's a high-level fighter.
Well, he's not confused because this is the level. This is what it takes now to be a UFC fighter. He's done whatever he needed to do. That was beat CM Punk. Now he is a UFC fighter. Is he the elite of elite? When you look at all the best fighters on the UFC's 400-person roster, how many fighters actually fit in that level? If you talk to trainers and coaches and the peers, I would think the majority of fighters on the UFC roster are underneath that.
Yeah, but the other problem, and I'm still on Mickey Gall here because I like the kid, is if he really believes he's good enough to win these fights, that'll stall his progression. His progression to greatness, which he could achieve in 5 years, will stall if he thinks he's good enough to beat the top guys, or if he doesn't understand how good Dan Hardy is. It will stall his ability to grow as a martial artist. So this is super harmful in a lot of ways. Also, it's like I got to keep my name in the press. You don't got to keep your name in the press. You got to keep growing as a martial artist and winning. People will forget in a month, and then they'll remember again.
And he is growing. To be fair, we know that he's traveling around the world to get knowledge. He spent time training at TriStar in Montreal. And good for him, the fact that he has only a handful of professional fights and he's probably making more money than anybody else that has 4 or less professional fights. Exactly, can't blame him for that.
No, it's great for him.
Had this guy not gone near a microphone, he wouldn't be in the UFC right now.
But I will tell you the problem and the concern with this approach is you burn super hot and then you lose 2 or 3 things and it's all over. The long play is you slowly grow along with your skill and ability to win until you're a champion. Because if Paige Van Zandt or Sage Northcutt loses 1, 2, 3 more, or just shows up and you go, oh, they didn't turn into that, then they go bottom of the pack and you had your big moment and it's over. This is a big, a hot burn with the potential to end quickly when you go this route. Talk, get the fights. Suddenly you find yourself talking it into a fight with Dan Hardy. If Dan was unkind enough to choose that fight, you get murdered. Then you want to be in the thing again. Your name
be a
in there
life-changing
again.
beating too.
Yes, it can. And so if you are working with fighters, even if you're a fan of fighters, you want to help them build a long play career. Their goal would be to get better and better and better, and in 5 years be in a position to really keep rate with the young people that are coming up, the Cody Garbrandts, the real shit. So this sort of cannibalizes itself, this route.
So in closing, Phil Brooks is still under contract to the UFC, but should he not be under contract, Bellator will talk.
Coker's interested.